Why do you and your employers find it so easy to further damage the world that young people of my generation will one day inherit? Through your disregard for the environment and your role in continuing our dependence on fossil fuels, haven't you done enough damage for one lifetime?
On the side over there, there's Martha Pazinski, she's in charge of the right-of-way questions. Stephen Keeby, public affairs, and Mike Lennon, also right-of-way. So they'll be answering questions after their presentation. The presentation will be 15 minutes, followed by questions and answers. Because of time constraints, we're limiting questions to 1 minute, and then the answer, we'll attempt to answer the question in 3 minutes. If we have extra time, people can come up and ask a second question. If you want to ask a question, you should sign up here. We have 3 lists. One is for people who have property on the right-of-way or abut property that's on the proposed pipeline route. We will be calling on them first. Another list is for Richmond residents. We'll call on them after all of the landowners and abutters have had a chance to talk. And then the third list is for non-residents. And we'll take questions in the order in which they're written on the list, with the priority being, as I stated, landowners, then residents, then non-residents. There's no petitions allowed in the vet hall, no signs. But there are postcards addressed to FERC that you can use to write comments. They're blank, so you can write a comment, pro or con. They're in the entryway. And if you want to leave them on the table, there are volunteers who will put stamps on them, mail them, and post them. Or you can take them with you and post them yourselves. Well, I guess that's it. So the Kinder Morgan presentation will begin now, and that will be 15 minutes, followed by questions and answers. Thank you.
Well, thank you to the board for having us. My name is Steve Keedy, and I work in public affairs for Kinder Morgan. And I'm here with Mike Lennon, who will assist me in answering questions. So Kinder Morgan is an energy transportation and storage company. We don't drill and we don't sell energy, we transport from the supply to our customers. Our customers are local distribution companies and power generators, like a Berkshire Gas, a Liberty Utilities, or a National Grid. We employ approximately 11,500 people in North America, and we operate approximately 80,000 miles of pipe. So here's an asset map of our natural gas pipelines throughout North America. I want to highlight this line right here in purple, which is the Tennessee Gas Pipeline System, which we are proposing to expand with our project here in New England. So this Tennessee gas line originates in the southeast and travels up north, passing through the Marcellus Shale and into the northeast. This Marcellus Shale region is located in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and New York. And this is one of the largest concentrations of natural gas in the entire world. So traditionally, gas flowed from the south in the Gulf region up to the north. But with the discovery of the Marcellus Shale, gas is now flowing from the north to the south. And as you can see, our Tennessee Gas Pipeline System is strategically located between the Marcellus to deliver low-cost domestic energy to the northeast. So here's a list of our existing shippers in New England. As you can see, Liberty Utilities, New Hampshire local distribution company, has been one of our customers for a long time. So Kinder Morgan has been operating in New Hampshire for over 60 years. Here are some pictures of existing right-of-ways in New Hampshire. Pelham, New Hampshire right here. As you can see, the pipe marker is right here. It's another picture of Pelham right here. And as you can see, this is a 50-foot right-of-way that we maintain by mechanical means, and vegetation has grown on both sides. Salem, New Hampshire as well, and Wyndham right here. So here are some pictures of our above-ground facilities located in New England and New York. Here's an existing compressor station in Pelham, a valve station in Bolton, Massachusetts. Another picture of the compressor station located in Pelham. and meter station in Schodack, New York. So as I mentioned, Kinder Morgan has been operating in New Hampshire for over 50 years. We operate approximately 50 miles of pipe and paid approximately $1.7 million in taxes to New Hampshire last year. It's called the Concord Lateral. As you can see, this has been here in New Hampshire for over 60 years, and there are 2 pipes right here. So regarding the need, as coal and oil plants are retiring, our reliance on natural gas has been increasing for electrical generation. In 2013, New England relied on natural gas for electrical generation for over 50% of electricity produced. Further, this reliance is only going to increase as coal, oil, and nuclear plants are retiring, like Vermont Yankee, Salem Harbor, due to emissions and operating costs. So on March 5th, Kinder Morgan announced it had reached agreements with our anchor shippers. Our anchor shippers have signed long-term contracts through our pipe to serve their customers, which would be local homes and businesses. Our second largest shipper is Liberty Utilities, which is a New Hampshire local distribution company. Others include National Grid, Columbia Gas, Berkshire Gas as well. So Kinder Morgan is proposing either a 36-inch or 30-inch pipe. The size of the pipe will be driven by customers. Currently, we have about 500 BCF committed to our customers today. And when we filed with FERC, we filed the pipe up to 2.2 BCF. But we will only build a pipe that meets our customer demand. So over the past 8 or 9 months, we've been doing outreach meetings with Board of Selectmen, state agencies, legislators. We've been refining our route, working with concerned stakeholders, whether it's a landowner, state agency, taking their input and really refining the route. We filed for pre-filing in September 2014. And pre-filing is about a year-long process. We've held open houses, 5 in New Hampshire in February, and we've also held over about 53 town hall meetings like this. We won't file our certificate with the FERC until the 4th quarter of this year. And then our anticipated FERC approval would be 4th quarter of 2016. Construction would begin in January of 2017, and the proposed in-service date is November 2018. So federal, state, and local agencies will have extensive participation in the regulatory and permitting process. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has overarching jurisdiction on all interstate pipeline systems, but many state and local agencies will play a critical role in the permitting process, specifically the New Hampshire Site Evaluation Committee. So here's the route of our proposed project. It originates in Pennsylvania, comes up to Wright, New York, and this is called the supply path component. From Wright, New York, will be co-located along our existing line, and then traveling across Massachusetts and entering New Hampshire above Northfield and Winchester. We follow southern New Hampshire and ultimately end in Drake. I want to mention that this route is over 90% co-located along existing utility corridors, and we get many questions about what co-location means. Co-location means within or adjacent to existing utility corridors. We would like to be completely within that existing utility corridor, in this case the power line. These negotiations are ongoing with the utility company, but as I mentioned, we would like to be completely within that existing corridor. So as I mentioned, we're in the FERC process, and I want to point out the FERC docket right here, which is PF 14-22-000. Let me encourage all of you to sign up to the FERC docket. You will get real-time updates from our company, from other stakeholders, and anybody who wants to submit a comment on the project. So here's the proposed route through New Hampshire. We enter Winchester above Northfield, Massachusetts, transverse across southern New Hampshire, and ultimately go down to Drake, which is our hub. So here's a list of some impacted towns that are on our project. As you can see in Cheshire County, Fitzwilliam, Richmond, Bryn, Troy, and Winchester. So here's a map of the proposed route through Richmond. As you can see, you really cut across the entire town right here. There are 21 impacted landowners in Richmond, and a projected tax revenue of $850,000 for the town. So some of the benefits of the project. It will create an estimated $11.2 million for local taxing bodies. It will create 3,000 union jobs. As you can see, the laborers are out in support tonight. All of the labor will be union. It will provide long-term energy reliability for the region. And there's room for expansion on the project to meet future economic growth. So as I mentioned, Kinder Morgan is committed to a transparent process with all stakeholders. We've had town contacts with every impacted town on the route through New Hampshire. We've also briefed all legislators, including the governor, state senate, state legislators, chambers of commerce, and any other interested stakeholders. We've also held over 53 public presentations to date. As you know, we're in Richmond tonight, and then later on we'll be in Fitzwilliam as well, getting a summer report and answering questions that attendees may have. We also, as part of the FERC requirement, we have to hold open houses, which are regional meetings where we bring our entire project team in, project management, right of way, public affairs, construction, and we have detailed mapping there. We held 20 of those this past February and April, finished up a couple weeks ago. We had our first one was in Winchester as well. So Kinder Morgan is also committed to be a good corporate citizen. We look forward to working with all park departments or fire departments, fire and rescue, and we pride ourselves in being a good corporate citizen. We also have a foundation that promotes the artistic and intellectual interests of young children, whether that's a local museum or a school. And that's the presentation, and we'll be happy to answer questions you guys have.
Okay. All right, anyone wanting to ask questions, if you haven't signed up yet, please come up and give your names here, and then we'll call out people's names. We'll call 3 at a time, so you can just line up at the microphone like we do at town meeting. And the first priority goes to property owners and abutters. Curtis Douglas, Debbie Douglas, and Sam Douglas. If you could line up by the microphone and then limit your questions to 1 minute, and Kinder Morgan will respond.
In December, you sent a letter to us indicating that you may want to locate your pipeline on our property. Excuse me, sir. In December, you sent us a letter indicating that you may want to locate a portion of your pipeline on our property. And then you promptly mailed that letter to a neighbor of mine a half a mile down the road. And since that time, in spite of repeated efforts on our part to be proactive and reach out to you to talk about the impact of the pipeline on us and our property, I haven't heard a peep out of you guys. Nobody. Not a phone call, not a letter, not a knock on the door. I'm starting to wonder what's going on with your communication. I look at that slide and I see all the people that you're outreaching to. I'm a butter. My house is 40 feet off the pipeline, and I haven't heard from any of you. Want to comment on that?
Well, yeah, first of all, apologize if we haven't been able to get in touch with you. I'm a little confused when you opened that we did mail a letter, but then the letter went to the wrong address. Is that?
Yeah, you didn't have my right address.
Okay.
All right. So let's talk about what we're doing now, and then I'll make a commitment with you. And Martha, can you stand up for a second? Martha's the local agent working in the community now. So before we leave tonight, I'll make sure you guys exchange information and promise that she'll visit you or talk to you on the phone, whatever your preference
So that's a
is.
different promise than Jim Hartman gave you over in Winchester, because he never called me either.
This is my promise, my word, that I will get back. I will make sure that I get your phone number.
So let me explain.
And I'll give you mine too.
So let me explain the process that we're going through now. we've identified a 400-foot study corridor, and we've attempted through the publicly available data to reach out to those folks. There have been errors with the addresses we've obtained, with the ownership is not always current. So in conjunction with our initial consultations or outreach, we're actually running title on all the parcels, pulling deeds, plotting them to obtain the latest and most accurate ownership information and addresses. So it's in this pre-filing, this initial phase. It's not perfect, we don't expect it to be, but part of the consultation, part of the reason we do open houses and have these meetings is try to get an interaction with folks for those properties that we're missing. So
I own mine, you don't have to spend any time running a deed on mine. Just clients and
we definitely will, I promise you that, studies.
Hi. On March 26, 2015, there was an article in the Concord Monitor, and it carried this headline, "Officials, Pipeline Won't Use Eminent Domain." The article opens by stating that, quote, "Pipeline developer Kinder Morgan will not take any New Hampshire homes through eminent domain. Company officials told lawmakers in Concord Wednesday." Quote. Also included in this article is the following quote from Alan Ford, who's the Vice President of Public Affairs at Kinder Morgan. He said, "At the end of the day, we're usually 95% or higher on voluntary acquisitions. We will not be taking homes as part of this process, period." Really? What if the house is in your way? The permanent easement of the proposed pipeline goes through a portion of my house. But you're not going to take my house. So you want me to live in a permanent easement for the pipeline, right? If you will not be taking any homes through eminent domain, will you also not be taking any property through eminent domain? Because the statements in the Concord Monitor can easily lead one to believe that eminent domain won't be used at all. But I guess that's probably not true, is it?
So, just to be clear again, there will be no homes taken as part of this project. And you referenced that the permanent easement at this point in time is going through your home.
Yes.
That will not be the case, absolutely not.
Absolutely not. At this point in time, we have a preliminary 400-foot study corridor. We have not finalized the location of the definitive pipeline or the permanent easement, and will not do so until a survey data has been obtained, landowner consultations, and another variable that Stephen alluded to was consultation with Public Service New Hampshire Eversource. We are attempting to co-locate with the existing power line that's there for the majority of the project. So at this point in time, we still do not definitively know until we survey and work with them to see how much of that existing easement can overlap or be within Eversource's existing right-of-way. That's the goal. That will minimize impacts outside of their easement, but we will not be able to do that in all cases. Depending on the location of where their existing transmission line, the towers are, the height of those lines, the voltage in those lines, that will dictate how much of their existing easement we can overlap, be within, or be adjacent to. So all that is preliminary right now. We have not conducted survey, we're just starting to. We've started a consultation with them, and that will ultimately dictate where that 400-foot study corridor, as it gets narrowed down to a permanent 50-foot easement, where that exactly will be. And I promise you, there will be no homes within that permanent easement.
Well, we measured it ourselves. We used the INGAA construction primer that Kinder Morgan helped write. And that's how we know that we're there. So if you're saying to me, you're not going to take my house, then are you saying that you're going to move the pipeline someplace else? Because you have no choice but to go through my house if you stay where it is on the left side of the power lines.
Well, again, I think you're referencing the center line of the study corridor, 200 feet on either side.
So, but to answer your question, yes, where we can move within the existing public service in New Hampshire right-of-way, whether it be to take a smaller right-of-way, permanent easement, or potentially to deviate from the power line. There will be areas along this pipe, along this proposal, where we know that will have to happen. So again, the co-location is a theoretical concept to minimize overall impacts of the project. But individual properties, case by case, there definitely will be areas where we have to be wholly within the public service New Hampshire easement. Perhaps we'll switch to the other side of where that study line is right now, or potentially deviate from that. All this, and I understand as a homeowner, there's preliminary maps out there, there's a lot of conversation, and I understand how concerning that can be to you when you make these assumptions or you hear these things, but we promise you that if this project moves forward and we file in the fall, at that point in time, we will actually have tangible survey data. We'll have the title work and the deeds plotted. We'll have finalized our consultations with Eversource to know where we can and cannot co-locate. And at that point, later this year, into the fall and the winter, we'll be able to sit down with individual property owners with a plan specific to their property and hopefully alleviate some of those concerns. Doesn't mean we'll come to you with a perfect plan, because again, that would just be our concept, Public Service New Hampshire's. That would begin the negotiation with landowners as the most appropriate thing.
Thank you.
Sam Douglas next, and if you could approach the microphone, Norm Woodward, Lou Widow, and Marcus Beauregard. Line up after.
I've been researching the proposed pipeline and its impacts for a paper I'm writing for school. I've learned a lot, but I wouldn't call most of what I've learned positive. Actually, I call it alarming, particularly the facts about what happens when one of your pipelines explodes. I've also learned a lot about the impact your pipeline would have on the environment. My question is this: why do you and your employers find it so easy to further damage the world that young people of my generation will one day inherit? Through your disregard for the environment and your role in continuing our dependence on fossil fuels, haven't you done enough damage for one lifetime?
Your comment and regarding your question on reliance on fossil fuels, what we are proposing is a project to meet the demand for Northeast gas consumption, whether that's for home heating or electrical generation. Whether New England, if you're operating an electrical grid, chooses to move forward with more additional natural gas pipelines, hydro, more renewables, that's part of a larger public policy debate that will be determined by DPU commissions, the 6 New England governors, ISO New England, the FERC, and we're a part of that conversation. What we're proposing is a project to meet the demand for natural gas in our region. But thank you.
Nora Woodward, Lou Widow, and then Marcus Beauregard.
Would you rather me not use the microphone? I had a lot of difficulty hearing. Yeah. Is this okay? Can you all hear me?
Yes.
All right, we'll do it this way. I'm 88. We love Richmond. We've lived here for 24 years, and it is a delightful area. I am technically not right next to where the pipeline will go, so I don't qualify as a butter affected as severely as would Kurt and Debbie be. But my property abuts that kind of a place. I'm just one removed, but I'm very much affected as an abutter would be by the 900-foot incineration zone, they call it. That, you know what, you're all familiar with the incineration zone? What we are trying to do here, quite frankly, is write a real estate ad, because I'm anticipating at age 88 that the life's inevitables are going to be closing in, and within exactly the same period, you gentlemen will be installing that pipeline. And right after it will be installed are the days when we will probably have to move because, again, of life's inevitables that occur when you're really old, okay? What I'd like you to do is kind of help me write the real estate ad.
I don't think that question that requires a response, Norm. It's,
I simply can't hear with the dog on my.
I don't think that's a question that needs a response, Norm.
Oh,
Sorry,
okay,
it's a
good.
difficult thing to do.
Well, I'm going to close quickly. I know I only have 1 minute, and I'll close quickly. So far, I've got, for sale, beautiful, very well-maintained salt box on a country road, 22 acres of pristine.
okay, Norm, we're gonna have to move on to the next question, or people won't have an opportunity
But
to
one
ask.
thing I didn't put in there was something, and I think in the interest of full disclosure, do I not have to put in it in the incineration zone?
Amen to that.
Sorry.
All right, Lou.
Lou Whittem, full disclosure, I'm not in a butter either, but I am in the incineration zone across the street from Norm. I don't know, a couple, 3 months ago, I wrote a letter to the Sentinel because the fact is New Hampshire needs energy. But I've changed my mind on whether or not we need this pipeline, but I really want to understand what the benefits are to New Hampshire and specifically Richmond. I saw $850,000 in taxes. Now, the $500,000, I guess it is, decatherms a day. What percentage of that is available to New Hampshire? And are there any, I know Liberty Industries would be interested, and I think they own the facility in Keene, so they'll probably put a pipeline up to Keene. But what about all these towns that the pipeline's going through? Would anyone supply us with natural gas? I know you're a pipeline builder, not a distributor, I understand.
Sure. So we transport the gas, as you said, and supply to the demand. And Liberty Utilities is one of our anchor shippers. So as you said, you asked about the 500 that's committed. Liberty has committed about 115,000. That 115,000 would be for existing customers as well as potential expansion. I can't comment on what Liberty's expansion plans are. They're a separate company, but Liberty has come out and said that with this increased supply, there are potential expansion opportunities throughout southern New Hampshire.
One last thing, what percentage of it will go through to Drake it and then ship overseas?
It's a good question, and we get that a lot. Currently, Kinder Morgan has 0 LNG customers. I'll read that, 0. However, under the Natural Gas Act, we cannot discriminate against customers. The federal government does not allow us to discriminate based on where the gas is going. So if an LNG customer could sign a firm, long-term contract similar to Liberty Utilities or a National Grid, we cannot discriminate against them. But we do not have any LNG customers right now.
Typically, how long is the contract?
15, 20 years approximately.
Thank you.
My name is Marcus Moriard. I live on Route 32. I've been one of your pain in the butts. I don't allow me on my property. And I know my property is crucial for the fact that I do own land on pond and my own well at the house. If you do any blasting, even my house may end up falling down. You're going to be responsible for putting a new foundation underneath my house or drilling me a new well. How often will you test my wells if nothing else happens?
So before I comment on the blasting and the testing process during construction, you referenced, I won't use your words, but that you have not allowed or granted us to survey on your property. One of the reasons we're doing that now is to identify existing wells, wetland features, ponds, structures, and where they are in proximity or within that study corridor. So part of the dialogue, I'll ask again, you don't have to answer, but one of the reasons we would like to go on your property is to identify exactly where those wells are. That kind of information will allow us to design and adjust our route to minimize or avoid those impacts. With that said, before construction were to begin, and once the pipeline route is finalized and we have all the information we can obtain, we will test wells, septic systems, and foundations pre and post construction, okay? When we test the wells, we not only test water quality pre-construction, but we also test the flow rate, okay? Because I know there's concerns that when there's blasting, that it might impact the flow of that well. We do the same with foundations and septics, or any other feature that a given property might have. Might be a spring, for example. We've done extensive spring studies if there was a concern. That information is shared with the landowner, both pre and post, and typically post-construction, it would just be once the restoration is concluded, we would have a one-time test at that point in time. If there was any issues or any discrepancy in the data, further testing would be the obligation of the company. If in any situation there was an issue with a structure, a foundation, a well, the company would be wholly responsible for that, and that would be part of the contract we sign with individual landowners. When we agree to that type of testing, it's all laid out in there, and certainly the responsibility that we have.
So technically, all you want is a 50-foot right of way, but you need a work area of 120 feet wide. By that work area alone, you wipe out all the trees I have left, you take out the hill in my backyard, you do destroy the wells, I don't know about the pond, and then you're also infringing on my neighbor's land, which is just right beside me, so I don't really see how you could do that. Plus the fact there's 345,000 volts going through those lines. Now, I cannot see a piece of equipment being underneath those lines, or even close to it, without getting a lightning bolt shot at it.
Sure, and that's part of the process. So you referenced the challenges associated with your property. We're blind to it right now. I don't have that. We've got a 400-foot study corridor slapped down on a map right now. Where that 50-foot or that 100-foot temporary easement could be, we don't know. We have to learn the features through the individual landowners. And again, we have to also have the consultation with Public Service in New Hampshire, Eversource, to find out what the voltage running through, what the sag in those lines are at the different time of years, where the towers themselves are in relation to their edge of their easement, so that we can figure out how we can site this thing. But you're absolutely right, there will be certain circumstances, certain areas where the lines are low and the towers are at the edge of the easement. We will not be able to have any overlap whatsoever. In other areas, I know around here, there's some space in the middle, in between two lines. Other areas, they may not clear up to the edge of their easement, or there may be 50 feet from the edge of their tower to that. Again, at this early stage, we've got a conceptual idea to co-locate with them. It, in general, will minimize impacts, but how it affects your individual parcel or where the lines are there, we don't know that right now, and don't expect it until the fall.
One more thing. On my deed, it states I have, the power company has an easement going across my land. I own the land, they have the right to maintain it. Now, it's in my deed that I can't do numerous things. Why can you come in and do work on that easement when it's already written in my deed that it can't be done?
Good clarification, a good point.
Good clarification, a good point. We have to obtain a separate and independent easement from the underlying fee landowner. We have to do that with you, okay? All individual landowners we have to do that with. We then have to make sure that our easement and the overlap we propose with the rights they've already gotten from you and the restrictions they've placed on you, that will be a separate negotiation with them with what we need to do within their easement. So two separate negotiations, both with the power line company for their easement, as well as the underlying fee landowner to obtain an easement from you. The compensation would go to you for the acquisition of the permanent easement and the temporary workspace. Separate negotiation with the power line company to be able to construct and work out a cohabitation agreement with them.
So if this happens, God forbid, do I get any kind of money for the trees that you wipe out and destroy? Or do I get to keep any of them? Some of them are hardwood and some aren't.
Right,
You know, do I get any kind of say what you're gonna do and, or if they do, if they go through my place with an oversized bulldozer and just wipe it out?
Right. So part of that compensation package will also be timber damages, crop damages, those. So you will be compensated for any trees that have to be cut on your property at the stump prices. So that's a negotiation we'll have once we outline workspace, hopefully get survey access to your property, learn more about it. we'll be able to sit down with you and more intelligently discuss what the impacts to your property would be. But there have been cases where landowners will do one of many things. Either we compensate for the timber damages, well, in all cases it will be compensation. Some people will choose to ask, well then could you please, when you cut those down, leave us the wood, we'd like it left for us. Some people will wait until we have a final certificate and notice to proceed on the project, go out there and log the land themselves, even though I've already written a check for the timber damages. Any myriad of things. It's your wood, and part of the negotiation would be how we handle that wood.
Okay, Hugh Van Rockland
Thank you for
and Ian
answering my
Spencer. And then beginning with residents, Bob Weeks. So Hugh Van Rockland, Ian Spencer, and then Bob Weeks.
My name is Hugh Van Rockland. I'm actually representing my mother. She owns the property actually across from, on Route 32.
What's the last name, so we can get it to the notes?
Van Brocklin, V-A-N-B-R-O-C-K-L-I-N. My father died here a few years ago, and my mother's now in a nursing home, and I've been trying to sell the property. And just as soon as the news come out about Kinder Morgan coming through, there hasn't even been any offers on the property at all. From information that I have gotten, the right-of-way can be anywhere from 30 feet to 150 feet. If it's 150 feet wide, you go right through the house. Say nothing about the septic system and everything else. And of course, nobody wants to buy anything that is under that question. One of my other questions is that it has been rumored that you're exempt from the Clean Air and Clean Water Acts, that if you have a leak or anything, you're not responsible for them. I'd like a response on that.
So I'll start with your question about the sale of the property. And we've heard some landowners here tonight talk about the uncertainty. They're not even proposing to sell. So understandably, any uncertainty puts hardship on folks. And we appreciate and respect that. We're attempting during this pre-filing phase to share as much information as we have. We don't have all the answers now. Don't expect them to have all of them until the fall. So there is a burden there, which we acknowledge. Once we have a plan and a proposal for your specific property that you've consulted with us on, at that point in time, I can't speak for real estate markets, I don't know your property, but in my past experience, it's the uncertainty that becomes difficult. Once an easement has been obtained and granted, or at least we have a proposal, now you have something to share with potential buyers. It's been resolved. I've had landowners keep that compensation for themselves and list the property as is. I've had people take that compensation and keep it in escrow as an incentive for a potential buyer, so the easement rights that we acquire. I suggest you consult with the real estate broker on that, what's the best plan for your property. But I do want to acknowledge for you, I do understand, during this conceptual phase of the project for the next few months, it is difficult because people understandably have questions. I will reiterate what I said to the woman before. We will not be putting workspace across the septic. We will not have permanent easements in a house. But right now, we do have a very wide 400-foot study corridor. And I think that our attempt to gather as much information as possible and conduct all the environmental and cultural studies also understandably has people saying, well, are they going to put this potentially here? And again, I assure you, we won't do it once we have specific knowledge of it.
Because I know we got all kinds of promises from public service when they got the property, and it's all been.
So, let me add to that. I don't know their past experience with public service.
Yeah, well, I'm not blaming you for that.
No, I understand.
It just makes me worried because public service didn't keep any of their promises at all.
So, the one thing I can advise all folks on,
We're talking conceptually now. I'm making a lot of statements that may sound good or reassuring. Don't take my word for it. When we sit down with you to acquire permanent, temporary easement rights, damages, everything in writing. Get everything in writing, not only the easement, what can be done on it in perpetuity, what the stipulations are for accessing your property during construction. You do have a voice in the process. We've got to get that in, as part of that contract.
Because after my former experiences, you'll be writing a book.
Right, hopefully that may be the case, that may be the case. Hopefully we can cover that. But yeah, absolutely, we will have specific stipulations for given properties, and we understand that.
Now, what about the Clean Air and Clean Water Acts?
I think people ask that question, and you want to comment on it, just the extraction of gas at the source, which Kinder Morgan does not do. Over the years, there have been, and this isn't my area of expertise, but there have been exemptions that industry does have. That does not apply to a transmission company. I want to be clear about that.
Because I'm worried about a leak polluting the water, because, you know, we all have to live with water.
Right.
We need the water.
We're responsible for those leaks, and we're responsible at, say, our compressor stations, for example, where there's controlled venting or inadvertent venting, we are responsible, and the air quality is tested. We are not exempt as
Do you test constantly, or do you test right after construction and that's it, or?
Continuously. And again, it's getting outside my area of expertise as to how often those things are tested, but the maintenance and the protocols associated with the pipeline, it is a continuous, ongoing thing.
Thank you.
How you doing? My name is Ian Spencer. I live across from Marcus, other side of the power lines, from Rockland's mother's house. And one way or the other, whichever side you're on, you are going to be extremely close to either my house or that house. What happens if you want to be on my side and I don't agree to your terms? I don't like your compensation package. Or Hugh doesn't, for that matter. Then what?
So you're saying there's a situation where it's tight.
Oh, yeah.
There's structure and homes on either side, so just, it's not a simple solution, go to the other side.
Yeah,
It
there's
won't
not
be effective.
400 feet
There's
on
gonna
one
be-
side, 600 feet, or 50 feet on the other. My house is probably less than 100 feet from dead center of the power lines.
So-
It's 50 or 60 feet from the right of way. Hugh's house isn't much further, or Hugh's mother's house isn't much further. So, his house is for sale, but what happens if the package that you offer him, he's not okay with? Then what?
So, first and foremost, we want to consult with the individual property owners to see which is most palatable to those people. We need to consult with the power company, again, I'll repeat myself, just to see which side has more flexibility, meaning which side are we more able to co-locate our easements, overlap easements, to avoid those
Yeah,
types of
he's the
attacks.
downside, so it's gonna be his side as far as elevation and ground structure and stuff. What, when you hit a property owner, this is
So
the
it does
side I
happen,
want to be
so
on.
one of the things I referenced earlier, in committing to try to find a solution, is it may potentially be a deviation for the power line route, okay?
But that's not an answer, there is no deviation route in this area. If you deviate around my house, you're gonna go through Marcus's house. If you deviate Van Rockland's house, you're gonna go through the guy across the street's house.
So one of
You
the
don't
things,
have,
it's tight, and so there are, we've outlined tonight several times, a 50-foot permanent easement with up to a 100-foot temporary easement. There are alternate construction techniques that can be used, that we would use in a more congested area, for example, in Drake, Massachusetts, where the line terminates. There were certain areas where alternate construction techniques would be used, where we may not have to take as much temporary workspace. And I don't know your area personally well enough, there could potentially be a horizontal directional drill to avoid surface impacts, and maybe in that case, we could go with a smaller permanent easement, and there would be no surface disruption. We'll have to do that on a couple of the water body crossings. So there are alternate construction techniques that might allow us to squeeze through one of those tighter areas.
and if not, if you have to take that way,
Okay, so the bigger picture of this, for whatever
Yeah.
reason, and I think
because of the geography, because of the geology, there's not a way
there's not a way around.
around between our two homes.
Well, there's always a way. What happens, like I said.
So now I'm speeding up our way. We don't like your charge, we're not willing to allow you on our land. So, and there is no way for you to get from point A to point B because of the power lines without going on our land.
So then, okay, so this is, I understand your question. This is more of a eminent domain process question as opposed to what are the construction techniques that you use, okay? So, I want to be clear about this. Kinder Morgan is a private company that does not have the powers of eminent domain. The federal government does. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission does. Later this fall, we plan to file permits with them, okay?
So they'll take it instead of you, it's
Well, let me explain the process. Let me explain the process. So, there may be circumstances where after the 2-year permitting process, after site visits with New Hampshire Site Evaluation Committee, the federal government, the company, where we evaluate all the different options, and we come up with a plan that's constructible, but may not be palatable to an individual landowner. After that very long process, in those few circumstances, it could potentially happen that the federal government could flow through those powers to Kinder Morgan.
So, okay, so your claim that Kinder Morgan doesn't take land by eminent domain is just
No.
to check that.
Never made that claim. There was a comment about houses. The houses, I believe the quote that was referenced earlier was about any structures or houses.
So you do it, you just don't do the dirty work, you make the feds do it.
No, we will not take
That's the right way to do it, and that's what you state to the federal government, and then the feds will do it for you. It's not that it won't happen, it's that whose hands are dirty and whose admit their hands are dirty. That's a big difference. And if you talk about transparency and talk about wanting people to be in support of you, or at least willing to talk to you, you should at least be straight up with us and say, you know what, when push comes to shove, we're gonna grab the feds and we're gonna take your land, whether you like it or not.
I think I did just say that. I just want to clarify.
When you admitted, you never stated.
No, but specific to our house, that commitment is in place. But we are on record at every open house we've been to and every other public meeting that federal process is part of this.
Yeah, so you'll take it if you want.
After about weeks, we have John Boccolini and Russ Provost, and we may have time for additional questions, so if anyone hasn't signed up, please, it's worth doing it, or to ask a second question, sign up.
I want to revisit a question that was raised by, excuse me, a neighbor, Lou Whittam, a little while ago. I believe he's in the incineration zone, is that correct?
That's true, yeah.
Okay. Anyone familiar with the field of public relations is familiar with the word spin. Spin is the art of using glittering generalities to avoid saying anything concrete. Yesterday's Ames Sentinel quoted Kinder Morgan as saying, and I'm quoting, "The increased availability of natural gas in New England would address energy shortages in that region." Let's analyze that statement. The pipeline will address energy shortage. That, folks, is what I would call spin, just as we heard at the last question from the last speaker. Addressing energy shortages tells us nothing about why Kinder Morgan wants a pipeline, and energy shortages in that region tells us nothing about how a pipeline would benefit our state of New Hampshire and other neighboring states, for that matter. But we can clearly understand how Kinder Morgan, building a pipeline, so a private out-of-state corporation could derive a huge benefit from loading its natural gas at the terminus onto boats so they can sail to foreign ports where it will be sold at a profit. We get that. So my question is very simple. On an average annual basis, and let's leave out the 100-year storms, what percent of the gas carried in your pipeline will be consumed by New Hampshire customers And what percent do you intend to be marketed to customers beyond our shores? Please note that I'm not asking for more spin, but actual numbers, and I'm sure that after years of planning this pipeline, you have them and can give us a simple answer.
Sure. Okay. Well, as I mentioned to a resident's previous question, we have 0 LNG export customers right now. Here's a list of our anchor shippers. We have no gas currently agreed to being exported. And regarding local benefits in New Hampshire, Liberty Utilities is our second largest shipper on the project. And that's going directly to New Hampshire consumers and businesses for gas delivery.
How firm is that number? Is that a contract?
Liberty Utilities is currently before the New Hampshire DPU with their contract.
So that's just a number that you put up on the slide. There's no more validity to it than that. Yeah, they'd be interested in maybe 150.
Well, they're currently before the New Hampshire DPU to get approval for that contract.
And where is the rest of the gas going?
So, this is what we have committed, approximately 500 decatherms a day. If we go with a 36-inch pipe, we have the capacity, or it's scalable up to 2.2 BCF per day. However, as I mentioned in the presentation, we will only build a size pipe to meet the demand in the region. So if we go with a 30-inch pipe, it has capacity up to 1.2, 1.3 BCF. We have 500 committed, which is approximately half of that 1.2, 1.3 BCF. We continue negotiations with additional LDCs and power generators, and those negotiations are ongoing. We won't file with the FERC our application for the certificate until this fourth quarter. So these commercial negotiations are ongoing.
That to me is spin. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, you've taken away the questions I wanted to ask, just by some of the things you've said here. I recently saw a presentation given by Kinder Morgan where they talked about having a 36-inch pipe. And it would depend over time where compression stations will be on how much is delivered to Drake. So you better get your P's and Q's settled. Kinder Morgan's in the business of pipelines, and this pipeline is carrying fracked gas. And what they do at those fracking stations is destructive to the health and well-being of children, of adults, of an environment. You guys are supporting that. You are aiders and abettors in that horrific action. You know, the pipeline itself does have some problems. Compression stations leak. They blow off stuff. You have the triggers that have some blow off to them. You have venting that has some blow off to them. And they're all blowing off methane gas, basically, which is the main thing that you are calling natural gas. So it is doing a bit of contamination to the environment. I can't imagine that if you didn't have some safeguards with the Clean Air Act, that you can get away with doing that. They're volatile gases that we can't even paint our houses with now in New Hampshire because they don't allow volatile gases. But yet you can blow off the stuff in our air. And you know, when all is said and done, you're going to leave people that live in this incineration zone, and they're going to be living the rest of their lives under the stress of what you're putting them through. So my question is really, how can you justify a project like this? Morally? I mean, I know you can justify it by saying the government lets us do it, but how can you justify it morally? And how can you justify doing what you continue to do with fossil fuels?
So regarding the overall, dependence on fossil fuels, as I mentioned, that is part of the larger public policy debate that we're a part of, that the 6 New England governors are a part of, state DPU permissions. What we are responding to is a regional need for additional natural gas for home heating and electrical generation.
Spin, yeah.
So answer something else. Give me some more.
Do you have any more questions?
So there were a bunch of questions in there, but you're just gonna spin them out? You don't have any answers? You just have problems?
Hi, Russ Provost, I live in Williamsburg here. I'm going to take a little bit different tack. I don't know how many members of Kinder Morgan have actually walked along the PSNH right away through our town. Matter of fact, I don't know how many members of... Okay, I don't know how many members of Kinder Morgan have actually gone through the PSNH right away through our town. I don't know how many people in this group have gone through that. I have, and it's not an easy task. When you go through Richmond, it's not like those pictures of Pelham or the two-dimensional maps that you have in your hand. Richmond is a series of granite hills that go up and down, up and down, up and down. They go from 600 feet on Fish Hatchery Road to 1,200 feet out in that direction. They're granite hills. And what's at the bottom of each one of these hills? There's a stream, a beaver pond, a wetlands. So it's easy for PSNH to have their towers at the top of these and just run their wires across, causing very little environmental damage to our area. I want to know how you're going to go through these granite hills. How are you going to go into these wetlands? Taking in mind that over 150 years ago, the railroads, when they decided to come to Keene, went through Fitzwilliam in Winchester because it was not economically feasible to blast their way through our town like you guys want to do.
So you raised some good points. There are some construction challenges here. All it's been, I don't know, that's the reality. There are. We have not, we do not have permission from our landowners to walk over. No, we could not without the underlying fee property landowner's permission. We have flown the line. Our engineers and our construction support folks have flown the line. We are aware of that. And so understandably, there are...
How do you get through the hills? Do you blast through the hills or do you...
No, we follow the topography. So the pipeline itself will be bended and match the topography.
And since they're granite, they're going to have to blast it.
Yes, theoretically.
So that's 6
absolutely.
miles of blasting through our town.
Yeah, we very much so with the granite state and the amount of rock that we see there. There will be blasting of the trench.
And it's not like the other towns. You go through Fitzwilliam and Ridge, it's flat. Richmond is not flat.
Right.
Melinda Honkala, Seth Reese, Stone and Rogers.
Melinda Honkala. And this has been covered slightly already, but I'll ask it in a different way. With so much news today about California's water crisis that we all are aware of, why would Kinder Morgan support, I know you're not in that industry, but you support it, an industry that takes anywhere from 2 to 4 million gallons of water to frack one well, to extract the frack gas that you're transporting through your pipeline. Why would you support an industry like that? Is there an answer?
Well, again, it's a philosophical question that Stephen has alluded to about a natural gas pipeline company transports natural gas.
Fracked gas.
The majority of the gas that's servicing the Northeast today is fracked gas. That trend will continue, whether this project is built or not. So 50% of the electric generation that's going on right now is via fracked gas. That trend, by all the experts, will continue unless there are policy changes in the Northeast.
Why would your company, Kinder Morgan, support that kind of an industry that is taking that much of our water, where California is in a crisis and we could see crises in other places? Why would you support that?
Kinder Morgan transports natural gas. That's what they do. You have a different opinion. Everybody in the room has a different opinion of how best for New England to get their energy over the next 30 years, how to replace Vermont Yankee.
Good answer.
Next, we have Seth Reese and Tim Rogers. Tim, you're here, so when Seth, if you're around, if you can line up at the microphone.
My name is Stillman Rogers, and I'm the chairman of the Ketchikan County Board of Commissioners. I also happen to live in Richmond, probably within a mile of your pipeline. The first person that stood up tonight said wanted to know why you had never responded to them. The Ketchikan County Commissioners got a letter from Kinder Morgan in, I think, January, and we responded to it. We too have never received an answer. We've never had any contact from Kinder Morgan in response to the questions and the issues that we pose. You've minced words with the lady who wanted to know if you're going to take her house by focusing on the word house and trying to avoid the fact that you would use eminent domain through another agency. I just wonder, I realize that your job here tonight is to be nice to us and try to talk people into the fact that this is a relatively pleasant thing and easy and not damaging to the town. But I have this great curiosity as to why you think we would believe Kinder Morgan when there's no response and the questions are all slipped over. Now, why, if you already have that pipeline that runs through Massachusetts, and this pipeline is going from Massachusetts to Massachusetts, why are you not using the Massachusetts route?
So I'll answer that. The existing pipeline system through Massachusetts that's shown on the map, first and foremost, that was Tennessee Gas Pipeline. Kinder Morgan's evaluation was to potentially, and there's currently 3 pipelines in that right-of-way now. The first one in the 50s, then the 80s and the 90s. So they've been expanded over time. There is not enough room in that easement or to expand that easement as the pipeline moves into southeastern Massachusetts and up towards Drake. Over the past 50 years, the development in those communities in Massachusetts has come right up to the edge of the existing easement. So there is not enough room, we refer to as congestion. There's not enough room within that existing pipeline system to do that. One of the alternatives that we've listed with FERC in our pre-filing, and will continue to do in our formal filing, is to outline the challenges associated with trying to route a 4th pipeline through there. An additional thing that people have brought up over time is why not follow the Mass Pike? Why not follow Route 2 as alternatives to our proposal? Those also have challenges due to development along those roads. The current Western Mass Electric and Public Service of New Hampshire power line easement gets the east-west trajectory. I understand and appreciate that there are local individual impacts, communities we pass through that don't necessarily see the benefit to it, but the guidance from the permitting agencies to co-locate with existing facilities has led us to this route. The commentary and the feedback on that route began in January, will continue through the duration of this year, including forums like this, and for the next 2 years after we make our filing. Will this ultimately be the route? I cannot say. There will certainly be adjustments to it, there have already been major adjustments to our proposals.
A lot of people, I and a lot of people in this room, I suspect, have a feeling that you don't really care and that the FERC doesn't really care about the concerns of the people in this community, and that it's going to happen to us regardless of our input. And that doesn't make us very happy with your company.
Thanks for coming, guys. My name is Seth Reese. I live on Bullock Road. I'm an affected landowner because this pipeline is going through my town. Oh, our town. Matter of fact, I don't have any question for you. I have a question for us. This is a pipeline. This is a company that deals with pipelines. They say that they're committed to safety, protection of the environment, operation of the facilities, and compliance with all applicable rules and regulations. That the majority of the pipelines fall under the regulatory oversight of PHMSA, which is the Pipeline Hazard Mitigation Group. Since 2006, they've had a total of 401 serious incidents, which comes out to dead people, severe burns, property damage in excess of $50,000, barrels of oil spilled. Unfortunately, they can't measure fracked gas because it escapes into the atmosphere and gets trapped in the ozone layer. But they measure that in dollars, $236 million in property damage, 30,365 barrels of oil spilled into the ground, millions and millions of their product lost in dollars, enough gas leaked from pipelines to power the state of Maine for a year.
Seth, you have to wrap it up.
Okay. How can you be proud of your safety record?
So, I can't comment on any of those numbers. I don't know the validity of them or where they come from. But all of our pipelines are regulated by PHMSA, and we hold ourselves to the highest standards under PHMSA and follow all safety protocols.
High standards.
Those are my standards.
All right, next we have Ray Bucko, Dixie Gurian, and Dave Scobie.
I don't need a mic. Greg Butko from 119. Isn't it interesting how special interests can always go to Washington and get what they want, so they can buy what they want, and frustrate what the people want? Maybe you should put the pipeline through Washington, D.C. My suggestion is, you talk about, don't believe you guys, which we don't. Everything should be in black and white on paper. It's not that simple. You get a contract and you guys do damage or something, you got to go to court. You're not going to pay because we got it on paper. Now we got to go to court. I propose that Kinder Morgan put up a $3 billion bond and hold that for 20 years against any damage they cause in this town. Yep. Put the pipeline somewhere else. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Any response?
That's a great idea.
I'll touch a little bit on the bonding that you referenced. So when the company and the contractors with the company move into an area, they do, a specific example, they bond the roadways, for example. So they're passed to the right-of-way that would have been bought by that time, whether it's town, county, state roads, there are permitting processes in place where bonds are for that. The number you referenced was $3 billion. I understand that's a different scenario, but you asked for a response, so there is a bonding process. As far as putting it in DC, I can't comment on that.
Excuse Excuse me, I have a question for clarification on that. If you bond the town roads, does the town hold the bond?
Yes, it's at the direction of the town, whatever the process that the town bonding requirements would be.
Hi, my name is Lucy Durian. I live next to Barbara and Tim Rogers, about a mile from the proposed pipeline. And I'd like to say, as the youngest speaker, and I'm not talking about me, maybe one of the oldest, but as the youngest speaker here tonight, Sam Douglas, is your name Sam? As he noted earlier, he's been researching this project and its ramifications. I think we all heard that. What we heard him say wasn't how much the town of Richmond would gain in tax revenue, nor the state would gain in revenue. Instead, with all the glory and idealism of youth, and thank goodness we have youth, he said the words that none of Kinder Morgan seems to understand or be willing to hear. He says, what's going to happen to this world if the worst happens? This is where I want to put a plug in for the birdies and the bees and the bunnies, whose lives are changed a lot if the worst happens. And while I heard you just say, you don't know any of what Seth was talking about the boo-boos that could happen when this blows up. And Norm said when heat and the property gets incinerated. But the worst does happen. And there's a lot of people in this room who know that I know what the worst that can happen is. You never think a tree is going to fall on your son and kill him at 28 years old. It happens. And Sam, I think, would like to live a good, pure, clean life, where he can drink the water from his tap, he can wash his hair, he can bathe his body, he can water the land, without worrying about what if there's a spill. The glory and idealism of youth. We're going to be long gone when he's trying to live a good, healthy life.
We have to wrap it up. Time's up.
Okay. I just think the pipeline is not for Richmond or for New Hampshire. I'm afraid I think it's for the shareholders.
Closing, we have Anthony Marvell, Peter Mayjoy, and Bill Manter.
These substations are compression stations. How often do they run? And do you have decibel readings on those for different distances? So if you're a mile away, you hear them, or what's up? Can you kind of explain that to everybody in layman's terms?
Yeah, we haven't really, that's all I can do is in the term. So yes, we haven't really touched a lot on compression tonight, but based on the current design of the pipeline and the route, we would propose to have a compressor station somewhere in the Northfield, Massachusetts area, and another one somewhere in the New Ipswich, Mason area. Okay, so kind of on either end of the community. As far as siting those, it's not just a case of finding a large parcel of land that would be suitable to build those in close proximity to the pipeline. Part of the evaluation or the determination of appropriate sites is decibels, the acoustics associated with that site. So Kinder Morgan would secure a couple of option agreements for their primary sites and alternative sites, and then an evaluation would begin. The standard surveys, cultural, civil, environmental issues, but also acoustics. And the simple metric for that would be the nearest noise receptacle. Okay, so whether that noise receptacle was 100 yards, 500 yards, or a mile away, that would become the baseline for the acoustical requirements associated with that compressor station. A structure, a home. She asked what define noise receptacle.
Yeah.
So
What does that mean?
a place where people congregate, something like that.
So I mean, if you're sitting out on your back deck, you're gonna hear it running.
So
Well, if you're outside-
if your back deck was the nearest point where a person could be in here, and I'm not talking about a person blocking the woods, but I'm talking about a permanent structure or place. That would be the location where
These
the
things
testing would be done.
aren't, these things aren't like the rumors, every 300 feet there's one or anything like that
So
right there.
the way it's proposed now
Long
in
ways
this
apart.
design, and this will all be part of the filing, but I know pre-filing, somewhere in the Northfield, Massachusetts, there's a 4-mile compression band that would have to be in the Northfield, or somewhere in the Webster.
Anthony Marvell, and we have Peter Makejoy and Bill Mander and Jeffrey Scott.
Is it Marinello?
Sorry?
Anthony Marinello?
Oh, yes, sorry.
It's my last name, right?
Yeah.
I heard a lot of generalities tonight, which other people have alluded to. And part of what needs to happen is people need to be able to make informed decisions about what's going to happen in their town. When are you guys coming back with real information? And I find it actually very disappointing that you don't have a lot of that now. You've done surveys flying over it, all right? There's satellite maps that you can get. You can see there's USGS surveys. They're going to show you the type of soil, how much granite's around in different areas. You guys probably have a pretty good idea of what's out there in this 400-foot corridor that you're looking at. When are you guys coming back with concrete information about exactly what the plan is, so people can make appropriate comments to the federal government?
The short answer is 4th quarter of this year.
Okay, and when does the comment period end?
The comment, that would actually technically begin the comment period on the formal filing. I'm glad you brought that, there's a lot of confusion with folks right now. Right now, we're in a pre-filing process, a process that did not exist years ago. But right now, in an attempt to have companies at an earlier stage engage with all the stakeholders, elected officials, landowners, communities, to try to share what the proposal is and gather as much information as possible before even applying for the federal and the regulatory process, regular filing process. That process, once it begins, at our best case scenario, is a 2-year process, could absolutely be longer. That's when that process will begin. So I've heard people express concerns. We did a filing in March, for example, and they felt like the comment period was closing. That was for that particular filing. There will be opportunities for comments throughout the duration of this. Obviously, the more dialogue, the more interaction, the more we can learn and share early on, the better. But as I noted earlier, it is frustrating for people that we're speaking in generalities, we don't have all the information, but by the end of this year, we plan to, and that will begin the process. With that said, there's some specific milestones approaching. We just concluded general open houses to give a basic education. FERC will host scoping meetings sometime this summer. I don't know if we've set any dates on that yet. So sometime this summer, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission will come out to the communities along the route and host a scoping meeting where people can get on record with their testimony based on the preliminary route and filing and concepts. And then, like I said, 4th quarter of this year, I'll be in a position to have the team sit with individual property owners and share a specific plan. At that point, we'll begin the permitting process at the federal level, the state level, and the local level.
So that's the piece. So you're talking about sitting down with individual property owners. This really affects the whole town, not as much as the abutters, for sure, but it certainly affects the whole town, affects the whole Northeast, affects the whole United States, right? We need to have all that information out there so the abutters and people can make informed decisions, not sit down, you guys sit down individually and kind of divide and conquer. Okay, we got a contract here, we got a contract there, where people are working on, commitments, right?
Sure. As I mentioned in the presentation, the FERC.gov website and our docket number, if you go to that website, you can sign up for our docket number and get real-time updates from all stakeholders, our companies, state agencies, any elected officials, and all that information, when we file in the 4th quarter of this year, will be made public on the FERC website. Sorry, can you go back to this slide? So this docket number right here.
So people should really wait, they shouldn't really be talking to you guys until we have a real better bit of information on what's going on.
No, not, so people shouldn't panic, there's a long process ahead of us. But the more feedback I can get, the Douglas family was here tonight, they requested that we meet with them and share information.
Not signing contracts, not.
No, just to share. People have referenced concerns specific to their properties, even if you don't grant a survey permission. If you allow myself or a field engineer or Martha to come to your property just to at least document some of your concerns, any information is valuable at this stage of time. So this is the time for us to learn as much as we can. Doesn't mean that those folks won't oppose the project or not like the idea of an easement being anywhere on their land, but we can at least design something before we even get to the permitting process that's not absolutely unacceptable to that landowner.
Thank you.
Peter Mayjoy, Bill Manford, and Jeffrey Scott.
My name is Peter Mayjoy. I'm about to break the mic. I live in Keene, but my wife and I and our children lived here in this wonderful, beautiful, sensitive, land-loving town of Richmond for almost 30 years. The 3 questions I'm going to ask you, I don't want you to answer. I would like you just to listen to them and allow them to sink into your souls and into your psyches so you can understand the simplicity of the feelings and thoughts that have been expressed to you here tonight. You do not want the pipeline. You need to understand that by actually moving into your psyches and your souls when you think about what's going on. Here are 3 of the questions. Please don't answer, just allow them to sink into your psyches and souls. 1, do you understand the connection between Richard Kinder and Enron? The Mammoth Energy Corporation, which in 2001 developed an accounting fraud involving over $100 billion that lasted many years, robbing honest and trusting people of enormous amounts of their life savings. 2, do you know that a recent scientific study linked birth defects to the presence of fracking within a 10-mile radius of the mother's home? 3, did you know that since 2003, more than 20 km pipeline accidents were serious enough to be reported to the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration?
Bill Manter, Chesterfield, New Hampshire, in solidarity with the people of Richmond. Hi, Mike. Is it true that you intend to use the thinnest stainless steel pipe allowed by the Federal Department of Transportation rather than thicker gauge pipe that you would use in urban areas such as Manchester? Do you value these people's rural lives less?
No, I know the company do not value anyone who assumes life less than anyone else's. We will follow the standards set forth by the DOT, PHMSA, for pipeline thickness, and that is based on population density. And the reason that is
You use type 1.
in areas that are more developed. Third-party damages are the most frequent cause of damage to the pipelines. So the regulations are based on the theory that, and folks will disagree and certainly comment to FERC about this, that in those areas where there's more likely to be third-party impacts, there is a different standard there than there is in more rural settings. No, I don't know what companies want value anyone assumes life less than anyone else's. We will follow the standards set forth by the DOT, PHMSA, for pipeline thickness, and that is based on population density. And the reason that is
You use type 1.
in areas that are more developed, third-party damages are the most frequent cause of damage to pipelines. So the regulations are based on the theory
folks will disagree and certainly comment to FERC about this, that in those areas where there's more likely to be third-party impacts, there is a different standard there than there is in more rural settings.
So we get the thin pipe.
I do not know population density, but common sense would tell us that Richmond is a very rural community.
Say hi to Curtis Cole and Alan Ford for me, Mike. I'm here for my grandchildren, and I'm here for yours, and Alan Ford's, and Curtis Cole's too, because those grandkids are not gonna like what their grandfathers are doing.
Jeffrey Scott, and then you can sign up for second questions if you like. John Boccolini after Jeffrey Scott.
Jeffrey Scott, also Chesterfield, New Hampshire. And we love Richmond, and we also love the environment. So two parts here. Back to eminent domain, you say that the federal government will not take homes, correct?
Correct.
How close to a home will you take land by eminent domain?
There is no minimum standard.
So you're saying up to 2 feet?
Theoretically, yes. I referenced some of those existing easements in southeastern Massachusetts.
Just wanted to hear you say it. Just wanted to hear you say it. Because if
No
you take
standard.
land up to 2 feet, you might as well take a home. Might as well.
There is legislation currently
Sure.
in the House right now. for that very case.
Second part, you moved the proposal up to New Hampshire because of protests in Massachusetts. They gave you a good fight, but guess what? You're in for a bigger fight right here.
So one of the things that slipped before, and I was looking for it in your presentation, you showed us these nice images of these compact little compressor stations that look like somebody's barn. You go to that slide? So the compressor stations I see and I hear that are going to be put in Northfield and New Ipswich are going to be 80,000 horsepower. And they're going to need 10 acres of land around them. Not quite what you're representing here. And that's one of the problems with Kinder Morgan. Is there transparency? I don't know. Trust? I don't know how we can trust when we feel like we're being deceived by it. So maybe when you come back next time, you'll give us the honest answers. And I hope it's, well, hey, you don't have to worry about us.
And so, the compression station, the picture there is the only compressor station that is in New Hampshire. It's a local example. At the open houses, we did have a schematic.
You don't have them here.
Yeah, I didn't say. I thought we, yes. So here it's a local example, but that's good feedback. Thank you. And we do have those graphics, which we brought to the open houses in Winchester and Ridge. And we can certainly email it to. Yeah. So if that's an action item from us, if we email it to the board, perhaps they can post that on their website. I'm certainly happy to do that.
After Stillman Rogers, we have Jim McConnell and Ernest.
Stillman Rogers again, I live here in Richmond. This town has ordinances because it's concerned about the safety of the aquifer. And part of the ordinances tell me what I can and can't do, and even when I plant my garden. And yet you're gonna run a pipeline through this town, and you're gonna use herbicides to keep it down. Well, in point of fact, you do. And you say in some other publications that I've been reading that you use non-toxic herbicides. But you've been cited, your company's been cited for using toxic herbicides. You're also going to be blasting through granite, and granite cracks. And cracks are the way the water gets into the subsoil. Anything you put on that, including any residues from your pipeline or from your herbicides that you use, is going to get into my
in the aquifer. The aquifer extends under this whole town and up through into Swansea. Is Kinder Morgan going to supply the people of this town with a substitute water supply system if you pollute that aquifer? Aquifers are polluted all over the place when you frack. I don't want the same thing to happen here if there's a problem with your pipeline. I don't want to be left hanging with a piece of property and a home that's useless because there's no water supply. So tell me what you do to make sure that there's no pollution of the aquifer that's directly under this property.
Kinder Morgan does not use herbicides to maintain the right-of-way. Kinder Morgan will use herbicides inside their fenced facilities. So the compressor station that we talked about earlier, a meter station, or a shut-off valve, inside those fenced facilities, herbicides will be used. To maintain the right-of-way, herbicides are not used, they are brush hogged. As to the question about the aquifer, that is one of the layers of data that we're obtaining now. Several communities have proactively sent us information about aquifers, where their concerns are, where the wells are, so that we can take that into account when routing the pipeline. I don't believe we've gotten anything like that from Richmond at this point. We did receive one letter that did not detail the aquifer, but that's still publicly available data that we are analyzing to put together the route. It may not lead to route changes in all cases, or it may lead to some of the alternate construction techniques that I talked about before. But we are aware of the sensitivity of the aquifers in these communities, specifically the fact that people are around the wells.
And now the last question from our Representative Jim Connell.
The plan that you have when you moved it up to New Hampshire added about 25, 30 miles to the pipeline length. You've indicated that you're going to have only one compressor station here in New Hampshire. In Pennsylvania, you've got over 16 miles. Now, what assurance do we have that you're not going to be adding them?
I question the 16 miles in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Question only one.
Yeah. I worked down there, so I know that our existing 300 line system does not have. I think what you may be referring to is, as part of the fracking process, the gathering lines
and the compression associated with those. But for the transmission lines in Pennsylvania, it's about the same distance that we have here. So we might be talking about two different types of compressor stations. However, with that said, based on the current proposal of a 36-inch pipeline with the 80,000 horsepower, I've outlined where those two compressor stations are proposed to be, Northfield and the New Ipswich area. 30 years from now, is there a potential to add compression? It's always a possibility.
Okay, what's involved in adding additional sites for compression stations?
The same process we're going through now. So it's not something that can be added in 6 months from now, 2 years from now. It's a wholly independent FERC permitting process, exactly similar to what we're going through now.
For every additional compression station?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, that wraps up the meeting. Thank you very much for your time. And if anyone has questions that weren't answered, Kinder Morgan will respond to written questions. We have paper here, you can write them down, and we'll transmit them to Kinder Morgan. And there also are blank postcards if you want to send comments addressed to FERC in the entryway. Thank you all.